Supreme Court justices appeared skeptical of the Trump administration's bid to limit birthright citizenship during oral arguments this week. Take a listen.
You say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual.
8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
How are we determining when or whether a newborn child is a citizen of the United States under your rule?
Signed on the first day of this administration, President Trump's executive order would only grant citizenship to babies born of at least one parent who is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, denying citizenship to even the children of many lawful immigrants, and overturning a 150-year-old precedent in this country of automatic citizenship regardless of parentage. Lower courts have already found the president's order to be illegal, preventing it from taking effect. A decision is expected from the high court by late June or early July. Joining us now to discuss, Democratic New York Congressman Adriano Espaillat. He is the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the first formerly undocumented immigrant to be elected to Congress. So, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We can imagine that you are supportive of birthright citizenship, as is the Constitution.
I have an opinion about this issue.
I imagine. How hopeful are you, based on the oral argument this week, that the justices will actually uphold the 14th Amendment?
Well, the reason why they sounded skeptical is because this has been really litigated across history. 1968, of course, in 1868, the 14th Amendment was adopted. 30 years later, you had the Wong Kim Ark case in the Supreme Court, which further established birthright citizenship. Then you had in the 1940s and 1952, two U.S. Congress pieces of legislation, the Nationality Act and the Immigration and Nationality Act, that both ratified the concept of birthright citizenship. So it's been litigated and relitigated. 255 kids could potentially be harmed by this if approved on a yearly basis. This will really have an impact on, and I think on the status and of this nation and what we stand for. And I think the judges understand that. This is really radical stuff.
How would it have that impact? What would it do? How would it change America if birthright citizenship was somehow overturned or repealed or...
Well, you know, as you said, there are legal residents and folks that are not here undocumented, that their children will be impacted. As I said earlier, 255,000 kids potentially could be born without a country. And so this is really radical with so far as how we've understood the country to be throughout its history. So this will be a U-turn from being a nation of immigrants, one that harbors people.
But isn't that what they want? Isn't that what the administration
wants? Some people may want that, but
I'm saying, isn't that what the administration wants? They don't want this to be a country of immigrants. They want this to be a country of nativists, as they call it.
That's correct, but that's a radical change of how we've been handling ourselves as a country throughout the history.
Too, you know, you heard Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson also raise the question of, and I think it's a reason for folks at home who might think that this has nothing to do with me. I don't come from an immigrant family. Maybe I don't have immigrant neighbors. I can ignore this. Is like, even if you are a citizen, it puts you in the position of proving your citizenship when you are going through labor and giving birth in a hospital. You're going to have to prepare papers or somehow, like, is a notary going to be there? Like, what is this?
Is it going to be ICE agents who are like wandering through the delivery ward? Yeah, it's
so
a mess.
I have a question, though, a more specific, narrow question. So a lot of the anger on the right is over, you know, so-called birth tourism, where women who have the means, they can travel to the country on a tourist visa, have a baby, obtain an American passport, which frankly, like, that sounds like a great idea if you have the means to. You know, I would want my child to obviously have an American passport. But what about, would you ever support a more narrow bill through Congress, not, you know, going through the courts, but where it limited so-called birth tourism?
I don't think that's been blatantly violated, and I think our council's across the country, across the world, could take measures, to prevent that from really happening in a major scale. I don't think there's any proof whatsoever that this has been dramatically abused by anybody. I think this is really a shot at getting a constitutional change to a concept that has been as American as apple pie.
Do you know how many? How many people have? How many birth? Like, are we talking about like millions of people?
Not millions,
but how many?
But enough that it is of cause. I mean, definitely, a couple thousand at least, and enough to provide some fodder for the right who want to narrow this. You're making this into a partisan issue, whereas I think it's constitutional. I think it's moral. I think it's part of American exceptionalism that our founding, that we do have birthright citizenship. I'm not saying I'm
and we're not alone, by the way.
But how about the more privileged path where
when you
people
apply,
do manage to game the American system?
When you apply for a visa to come into this country, which assuming these mothers do that are coming here for this tourism, you get asked on the questionnaire, are you pregnant? And it's not to deny you or not, but so that they know. And so to your point is what you're saying is the embassies can be more...
That's correct. The
embassies can be more strict in that. There are measures in place to prevent this kind of like exploitation, if you want to call it from that.
I want to ask the congressman really quickly before we have to go. It seems like the court is not going to go with the Trump administration on this. In fact, he actually left partway through the arguments, it seems, because he was very frustrated that it didn't seem to be going his way. But does that concern you at all that this administration, particularly, Stephen Miller types who are constantly working in the background to figure out their next route, will it move then to other mechanisms? For example, we know that they are very interested in trying to denaturalize naturalized citizens, go after them for alleged fraud, find some mistake, something they didn't fully, confess and give to the government during the process so that they can strip people who actually do already feel safe and secure as citizens of this country.
Yeah, I'm concerned that this is a radical opinion about immigration that's being peddled by the White House and people like Stephen Miller, and that somebody, yes, for a traffic violation could eventually be denaturalized. I think that's very concerning as getting rid of birthright citizenship. I think these are tenets of American society that are admired by the entire world. That's why people look up to us, because we provide these opportunities, and we're not alone. There are plenty of other countries that provide these benefits as well.
Congressman Espaillat, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Congressman.
Happy early Easter.